Hello, this is Panzer Paints. Today I will be painting the militia pickup trucks from the game Team Yankee by Battlefront Miniatures. I will be showing each step of the process from building, preparation, priming, base colors, weathering, and finally sealing. Let's get started. As you can see, there's a little bit to clean up there, but nothing to get too concerned about. The resin parts are a great cast, nicely detailed. I'm just going to take some pliers and quickly remove those excess parts that are not required for the build. Same with the wheels, but also coming through with a hobby knife and also a file. This is a little trick that I do to ensure that I get a great bond in between the resin and the metal parts. So I'm just here scoring the resin just to give it a little bit more bite. Always an important step next, just to check that the parts are actually going to go together before getting your glue out. For me, I've stopped using expensive hobby super glue and now just purchase a cheap super glue that you could pick up from any hardware store. At this point, I'm just going to put a drop of super glue in the little well where the wheel needs to go. Just maneuvering the wheel into position and holding it in place until the super glue sets. It doesn't take too long before all the wheels are put in place, and just hold it firmly until it's all set. These miniatures won't be static items that are just put on show. We're actually going to be in the position where we play with them, transport them, take them in and out of bags, so it's really important that we take extra precautions to make sure the bits are going to stay on. Okay, these are looking good, but I'm just not happy with them not sitting quite flush. The easiest way to fix this is to just take a sanding stick and slide it up and down until you end up with a pickup truck that sits flush to the table. As you can see, there's little bits of resin on this model, so it's probably a good opportunity to give this a good clean before we move to the priming stage. I like to use simple green. It's great not only for stripping paint off miniatures, but it's also great to give them a clean before priming. Just a little spray over the models is all you need. Then I'm just using some tap water. Just to ensure we've got no loose resin bits on the model, I'm just giving it a quick scrub with a toothbrush. And back with the water just to wash off any residue that may be on the miniature. Using some paper towel here just to dry the miniature. As you can see here, that quick wash in simple green's just taken the shine off the resin. In most cases, I'll place my miniatures on a temporary mount, making it easy to handle and making sure I can paint all over the miniature in one go without having to handle the miniature. The militia crewmen also get placed on a spare bottle top with some blue tack, just to make it easier to paint them also. The airbrush primer that I'm going to use is Stynel Res White. After giving the paint a good shake, I'm just adding it directly to the cup of my airbrush. To ensure a nice smooth coat, I'm going to run my airbrush at about 30 psi, so quite high, but this should give a really nice smooth coat. As you can see, I'm slowly taking my time building up that primer coat. This will ensure that we get a nice smooth base coat from which we can put our next colours on. At this stage, I've just sped up the footage just to show the process of slowly building up that white primer to ensure we get an even coat. For best results, I like to leave the primer on overnight to fully cure before moving on to any other steps. Now moving on to the militia crew. As before, I've sped up the footage just to show you the gradual build up of the primer coat. I'm really happy with the results here. After letting that primer coat fully cure, I'm setting up with my wet palette to start some brushwork. The first colour that I'm going to use is Basic Skin Tone by Vallejo Model Colour. As you can see here, the paint does come out quite thick, so I do like to dilute this paint with a couple of drops of water, just giving it a good mix with an old paintbrush. Now I'm switching to a fine detail brush to commence the painting. Painting 15mm miniatures is always a bit of a challenge, so what I like to do is slowly take my time building up those colours. It might take 2 or 3 coats to build up a nice consistent base coat. Overall, I'm happy with the end result, but as you can see, I have put a little bit of that flesh colour in other areas. But because we're starting with the light colours and then moving to the dark colours, any errors that we do make will be covered up in the next process. Next up is a sky blue colour that we'll be using for the jackets and pants. As you can see, this colour's a lot thinner and doesn't require any water to thin it down. As you can see, I'm just taking my time building up that blue colour over a couple of layers. With the pants and jacket complete, it's time to move on to the next colour. Using a nice bold red to paint a cap and also a jacket here. In keeping with the colours that I've selected for the trucks, I'm just going to paint one cap in a nice ivory colour. With painting a white colour over a green primer coat, it is going to take a bit of time to build up that bold white colour. As with the white, I'm just going to take a flat blue colour and use that to paint one of the baseball caps. At this stage I started to feel that some of the colours were getting a little bit too bright, so I came back with a khaki colour, using this on pants and a jacket. I felt that this miniature with the blue cap was a little bit too green and khaki, so I selected Flat Earth to paint his pants. Next up I used London Grey on one of the caps. At the rear of the head I can just see a little bit of hair on the miniature, so I'm going to take this opportunity to use a deep brown to paint the hair there. Now it's time to paint the machine gun, so I'm going to use a metallic grey colour. I always like to finish using the darkest colour, and in this case I'm going to be using a black grey to finish off the gun stands and the boots. After having a good look at the miniatures, I quickly realised that I'm missing a pair of iconic blue jeans, so I'm just coming in here to paint them now. Here are the miniatures before they receive their black wash. Over the years I've experimented with a whole range of different washes, and I've found that non-oil gloss is the best option for 15mm. As you can see here, non-oil gloss is very easy to use. Just slosh it all over the miniature and then carefully remove any excess. And after leaving the product for 30 minutes, you'll end up with results like this. Ultimately, if you're happy, you could pretty much leave them like this, but I'm just going to come back with a couple of highlights. The advantage of using a wet palette is I have all those base colours that I've used previously sitting on the palette ready to go. So I'm just going to come back here and highlight all those colours that I did put down in that first layer. With the flesh tone, I'm just using it to highlight the nose, the chin and the cheeks, top of the ear and top of the hand. I'm not going to show you a highlighted footage of every colour that I've used, but here's a really good example of highlighting with the blue on the pants. I did notice after washing the miniature in non-oil that there was an ammunition belt going into the gun, so I'm just coming here with some brass. Now it's time to remove the glossy wash. After giving the product a good shake, I'm going to add it directly to the airbrush, once again using 30 psi. This is a fantastic product giving an excellent result. Now it's time to head back to the trucks. I have selected the 4 colours that I'm going to use for the trucks. Here I'm going to provide an example of how I thin my paints for the airbrush. So just squirting in a small amount of paint there, then followed by 2 or 3 drops of flow improver, and then probably about equal parts of airbrush thinner, and that's pretty much it. What I'm looking for here is a nice milky consistency. Now it's time to add the paint to the airbrush, and I'm just going to run through all the colours that I'm painting here. So I'm starting off with the ivory, then moving into the red, then the blue, then the grey. At this stage they do look very bright and maybe not so suitable for the Team Yankee table, but there's a fair amount of weathering that needs to happen to them next. For the next step, I'm just going to mix up some paint, which is 2 parts white and 1 part the original base coat colour. Now taking some of that packing that you get in all Flames of War / Team Yankee products, I'm just going to rip this into small chunks, and we're going to use this for the chipping process. After doing some small samples, I quickly found out that 2 parts white to 1 part base colour wasn't sufficient enough, so I did increase it to 3 parts white and 1 part base colour. Now for the fun part, I'm just going to dab the sponge into the colour and then remove any excess and then dab it all over the miniature. The aim of this is to apply chips in all the high wear areas. It does come down to personal preference, but I'm pretty happy with the results here. Now I'm going to apply dark chips, looking for slightly less than what I've done previously with the colour German Camouflage Black Brown. Take your time with this step because it is very easy to go overboard and ruin the previous chipping that you have just done. After the chipping, I'm just coming back with a fine detailed paintbrush just to do some more defining of certain areas, in this case the bonnet. Using the Vallejo Color Panzerracer's Light Rust, I'm just going to create some areas of rust patches on the vehicle. I do have quite a lot of this rust colour in my palette still, so I'm going to thin it down with water and then apply a rusty wash to that back tray. Next up, I'm going to paint all the windows using Oxford Blue from Vallejo. At this stage it's really important to be careful because if we did get any of this blue paint onto the other areas of the miniature that have been chipped, it would look very bad and require a lot of work to fix. So as you can see, the process is I'm putting the colour on and then slowly pushing the paint to the edge of where it needs to be. Before putting down a layer of silver, I'm going to start by using a black base coat. I'm going to use this black base coat on the wheel rims, the front and rear bumper and the roll bar. And not forgetting the wipers. Now with that black base coat down, I can move on to defining all of these areas with a nice silver colour. I do find Vallejo metallics a little thick sometimes, so I'm just adding some water here to make it easier to apply the silver paint. I'm taking my time here loading up the brush with the silver paint. While I will be going over this miniature with a enamel black dark wash, I'm still taking my time to just focus on all the raised areas, especially when it does come to the front bumper bar and light area. After the silver paint has had a chance to dry, I'm just going to paint the tyres with a Vallejo black grey. Before painting the orange indicators and the red tail lights, I'm just going to put down a layer of white. With that layer of white down, it's going to be much easier to apply the colours of orange for the indicators and the red colour we've got here for the tail lights. Next up, I'm going to take 2 brown colours to create some mud splashes over the wheels and obviously on the truck as well. So taking a light brown here and a dark brown colour. First off with the light brown, now with the dark brown representing the wet mud. At this point I did notice that I had got some silver on the number plate areas, so I'm just putting some black paint back on those. Then with some white paint I'm just tapping with a brush to sort of roughly form letters and numbers. At this scale it's going to be very hard to see. At this stage I'm going to remove the truck from the temporary mount, and with some black primer paint, in this case Stynel Res, I'm going to paint all the underneath of the trucks. With that being done, it's time to return the trucks to the temporary mounts. Now it's time to add a layer of X22 Clear by Tamiya. I use an equal ratio of X22 and a lacquer base thinners. Just looking for a nice thin coat before applying the wash. It only takes around 30 minutes for that paint to dry, and then we're moving on to the dark wash. My technique for applying a pin wash is very rough, but the aim is to get that wash into all the recesses, and we'll clean up the excess wash at a later stage. Here I'm using some odorless solvent to remove the excess wash. With a layer of that clear coat down, you can be quite vigorous with the cotton bud to remove any additional wash that's on the model. While we wait for the trucks to dry, I'm just removing the bases from the militia crew so I can get ready to apply them to the trucks. And also giving them a quick sand on the base to ensure that we get a good bond between the militia crew and the vehicle. Just doing a quick touch up here. The best way to ensure that we don't use too much super glue when attaching the militia crew is to apply a small amount to a bottle top and then dip the miniature in before applying it to the truck. Back at the spray booth, I'm just here with some ultra matte varnish from AK just to seal off the miniatures. I'm just going to finish with two little steps that I think will make the miniature pop. Firstly, I'm going to apply metal medium to the headlights, and secondly, I'm going to use a hard coat or a gloss varnish over all the glass areas just to make them appear like they are windows. With that being done, it was time to remove them from the temporary mounts and get them ready for the game table. Here's hoping I roll a 5 to get to deploy them, but knowing my luck, it probably won't happen. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.